Well, welcome to Live with the Author. We're going to be talking to Reading Research Quarterly authors today. And today we have Aviva here with us. Welcome, Aviva.
Hello.
Fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about your RRQ study. Tell us the title of the study, your co-authors, and what your study was about, what you guys found.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So the title is I'll Show You How to Write My Name. And it resulted from a collaboration between Professor Nina Howe and Dr. Sandra Martin Chang on to code for 4 language and 4 literacy concepts that we felt would commonly occur with children within this age group.
Can you
And
give us some examples of what those were, what you were looking for?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, for example, we look for vocabulary instruction. We look for making letter to sound correspondences explicitly. And actually, I'll expand on that a bit when I discuss the findings and as they relate to the language and literacy concepts specifically.
Sure,
Is
go
that
ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
So, so we saw overall that over 40% of the exchanges at both time points involve language and literacy instruction.
Wow.
And it wasn't,
Did that surprise you?
no, not really. That wasn't that surprising. When we delved deeper into what exactly they were teaching, that was somewhat surprising and relieving and exciting. But but considering the young ages anyway, language made a lot of sense. And considering that the older ones progressed into formal schooling, it wasn't surprising to see that concepts that involving literacy were being taught. No, not especially. But and then there were certain things that we also found made total sense as well. So, for example, the older siblings taught the majority of exchanges, which made sense considering that they tend to take on these roles anyway, based
Right.
on this form of hierarchies that we see among siblings. But what we found was surprising but encouraging was that the number of sequences that were taught by the younger children increased proportionately over time. So they were becoming more and more active in this teaching at the second time point. As for your question, any surprising findings? I would say it was extremely surprising initially that how much vocabulary instruction was going on. And that led us to question what exactly are they teaching from a vocabulary standpoint?
Right.
So what we did was we further delved into it and looked at the subtypes of vocabulary that were being taught. And again, we found that there was a really large percentage that involved, in this case, expansion. And
Oh,
yeah, exactly. So it made us reflect, and what we're thinking we're seeing here is a transfer of a very common practice that the siblings might be seeing from when they interact with their parents that they're bringing in when they interact with their siblings. Because expansion is definitely a language technique that parents display with their children.
can you give us an example of what expansion would look like?
Yeah, so let's say the child says boat, and then the teacher would say, "Oh yes, that's a red boat."
Right. So adding details to their initial statement, adding
In,
additional descriptors.
in a nutshell,
The siblings doing the same thing. The younger sibling would say a boat, and the older sibling would say, "Oh, that's a red boat, little sister."
exactly, exactly. So that was quite exciting when it comes down to implications, because they seem to be transferring from whatever other interactions that they're having on the home base to these formal or informal instruction that they're doing amongst the siblings. Now, also what we found at the second time point, which I thought was pretty cool, was that literacy concepts were being taught significantly more often than compared to time one. Exactly. So that's matching the continuum of the formal learning and exposure that the children, well, the older children are having in their grade school.
So initially, the older sibling was initially 4, right?
Correct.
And so by 4, the 4-year-old wasn't showing a whole lot of spelling and writing to the younger sister. But they were 6 and 8 the second time, right?
4 and 6.
4 and 6. So by 6, the older sister or the older brother could then do a lot more of the writing and spelling, showing those formal literacy skills off to the 4-year-old.
Exactly. And not only are they learning it, but they're bringing it there. So they feel this level of comfort, shall we say, in order to, whether
mastery, they're the teacher.
Exactly. So whether it be to practice for their own rights or to show this newly acquired knowledge.
Very, very interesting. So what do we tell parents about your study?
That was my target population, truth be told, because I would tell them, because they are not people who typically receive language arts instruction. So what I would tell them is that they're doing a great job and that at least what we're seeing from an expansion standpoint, so from an informal vocabulary or language standpoint, the children are bringing that in when they engage with each other. But having said that, I would definitely advise them to allow their children to interact together, because when we as parents will jump in, it definitely interferes with the dynamics. Right. And in this case, it appears that the siblings in and of themselves are teaching and learning and just enjoying this whole experience. And
in a naturalistic way. And, some cool parts that you pointed out was that, big sibling is teaching little sibling, but as they get older, little sibling starts teaching big sibling too.
And that actually would be another message, because even though the little ones haven't entered school settings, I would not underestimate their capacity to contribute to these exchanges, because whether it be learned by observation of seeing the parents working on homework with the children, with the older ones, or whether it's just they're seeing these models of more advanced language going on, they definitely are contributing, and they do take on these teaching roles at an increasing frequency over time. So yes, I totally agree that the little ones should not be underestimated.
Well, so taking that message to heart, what do we now tell policymakers or principals or heads of school, kind of people in those higher level positions?
Well, I would say that a homeschool collaboration would be a really logical next step in order for everybody to be on the same page when it comes down to at least a formal literacy instruction standpoint, in that when we view parents and teachers as partners, as opposed to in silo, really the developmental outcomes and the whole effective atmosphere with regard to involvement in children's development can really be changed. And when it comes down to offering, of course, we're not talking about offering professional development per se to parents, but there could be language information nights that both members of the team can benefit from by interacting and joining together on that front.
So it seems speaking about where do we go with it, what is your next steps in terms of this research?
Well, the preliminary goal was to see whether they teach. So now that we've ascertained that, I want to delve deeper and see what exactly from these subcategories are they teaching? So definitely that content analysis would be one of the next steps. But in my mind, a second one that I think would be extremely revealing is to follow them up again. So if we were to do a subsequent analysis at a 2-year mark, the older ones would be proceeding into this reading to learn versus learning to read. And the little ones at that point would be entering formal school, formal grade school as well. So definitely the dyadic exchanges could be quite different at that stage as well.
So it sounds like you're kind of advocating for better understanding of the sibling teaching and learning relationship across a developmental spectrum. So what does this look like when they're little, and what does it look like as they're growing up and taking on different roles?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if we look at the child microsystemically, up until this point, when we talk about teaching, clearly it's the teacher or the parent.
Right. Yeah, and it even makes me wonder, you gave that example of it's a boat, and big sister says it's a red boat. I wonder if the next time they go play with that boat, little sister says, hey, give me back that red boat.
Mm-hmm.
Or whether it's still, it's still the simpler syntax. So
Mm-hmm.
at what point do they take up that expansion? Be interesting next steps as well. So as we're kind of thinking about this, do you have any thoughts that you want to leave us with in terms of takeaway messages from your study? What should we make sure to do as responsible practitioners?
Well, I would definitely say that when doing a lit review regarding the home literacy environment, the focus has understandably been on parents. And my message would be that these little siblings, whether they be 2 and 4 or 4 and 6, they're still quite young, they definitely appear to be playing important roles in this home literacy environment instruction, whether it be formal or informal, and that this occurs regardless of any external impetus. It occurs even when they hang out or play.
Wow. Those are big ideas, and thank you so much. I'm going to be certainly thinking about them and watching my kids in completely different ways and kind of asking more questions of my students as well to try to get a sense of what their home environments are like. And before, my questions were all more kind of larger family, but now I'm really interested in what's going on with their siblings, because I think you found that's playing such an important role. So thank you for expanding our thinking that way.